This is series number 4 in our journey on business and human rights. And today, something comes to mind, something interesting, and I hope that it will be interesting to you as it is to me personally. I happened to go to the market today to do some shopping for some groceries. Of course, let me just say some shopping, let me not call it groceries. But I went buying some stuff and I bought beef, I bought some carrots, I bought cucumbers, I bought pineapples, I bought watermelon, I bought fruits in general, and I would be frank with you that while in the markets, I found out that a lot of children are performing different activities in the marketplace. That's in the open market. And this season is actually a school season, the season where children go to school. And a lot of students are in the market. They are selling one item or the other. And what breaks me really is when you see children who ought to be in school in the markets. You see them in the markets. They do different things in the market. And how this relates to the subject of business and human rights purely has to do with the fact of child labor within the supply chain. If you look at the agriculture supply chain, for example, in some countries, in some societies, in some communities, you find out that easy and cheap labor is usually made available by children that work within these spheres. So the question for corporates, that's one, is your company employing children? Do you engage in child labor? Do you engage in child labor for profit-making purposes? Do you generate inflow? Do you generate profit on the backs of children? That's what we're really talking about here today. So when next you walk into a supermarket and you want to buy something, as somebody who is conscious, as somebody who has some consciousness on business and human rights, you would ask yourself the question, this beef that I want to eat now, were children involved in that process? Children who ought to have been in school, were they involved in shepherding the flock? A lot of you from sub-Saharan West Africa, you might understand what I'm actually talking about. Some of you in Nigeria might also understand what I'm talking about. Are children involved in this process? Is it ethical? This might be touchy because of the example that I have used, but the fact remains that could the product that you are selling today be tied to child labor? Could the products that you are selling today be tied to child labor? If you've seen this movie, I think Blood Diamond, you'll find out that, in fact, that movie is a great example, is an epitome to really showcase what this session is really about the fact of children who are being violated within the process of creating wealth for multinational corporations, creating wealth for companies, creating wealth for some kingpins in the value chain. That gold necklace or earrings that you have on is child labor involved in that process. The beef you are eating is child labor involved. Even the shoes that you are wearing, the clothes that you put on, is child labor involved. So we must begin to ask these questions. Child labor is more prone in certain sectors than others. Peradventure, for example, within maybe the oil and gas, the drilling system within oil and gas companies, you might necessarily find more of professionals, in that particular field. Their activities might create some environmental degradation and, deprivation of access to farming for those in the local communities. You may necessarily not find so much of child labor, but much of the time within the agro economy, within the agro value chain, you find out that lots of times the actions, the activities of children who could be your children, who could be the ages of your children, are primarily the ones driving that particular system. So we must ask ourselves, the ethical questions. even though we have the answers, but we necessarily cannot be the ones to implement those answers. But your voice matters. Your voice matters. We need to speak to some of these issues. We need to keep speaking to them so that we can begin to have a reorientation of families, where these children come from, for them to be able to make that proper judgment, to make sure that children are best designed to be in schools rather than to be on the fields, rather than to be on the mining sites, rather than to be on the agricultural farms. So please, let's get this right. Each one, reach one, teach one. If we adopt that system, I'm sure that at the end of the day, even without having to think about the coercion of the power of government to make sure that children are in school, without that coercion, we can do the bit that we can do to make sure that we get children off. We take children entirely off the supply chain. We take them entirely off the supply chain. That's also one of the things that the UNGP is trying to push. But countries have to push at their own end. It's for the states to do their bit to make sure that everyone aligns within the principles of the UNGP. And I hope that this really touches somebody where it should, of course, emotionally, right? But of course, the policy of government must also be able to address some of these issues. And we hope to see much more beyond the much that we have seen. And I'm quite sure that when we begin to put the proper people in the right places that can drive government policy and create change, society will be a whole lot better. So before you bite that beef, before you eat that burger, you might want to ask yourself that question: is this a product of child labor?